Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's Millie's Industry Monday. We are very excited to have you here. My name is Ali Emmerich, and I'm the Program Director of Arts Education, and I am joined by Jess Malcolm.
Hi, I'm Jess. I'm the program. What am I? What am I even? I don't even remember. My title changes and then I forget. Theater coordinator. I was just like emulating Ali.
Theaters.
Yeah, I used to be the theater technician. It changed.
We are also joined by our student host this week, Angelica.
Hi, I'm Angelica. I'm a student at Columbia College, class of 2023, and I'm currently the Vice President of Industry Engagement for Student Council for the Arts.
Wonderful. And we are also joined with this week's guest, Charise Green. Charise, would you mind introducing yourself and giving us a little bit about your bio?
Sure. Hi, my name is Charise Green, and I'm an actor by training. But since graduating with an MFA in acting, I've been directing, writing, and doing a lot of coaching for theater, film, and television.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So this, we like to talk about the different careers that are available in the entertainment industry and all facets of the arts. And I was wondering if you could kind of give our viewers a little bit of the path that you've taken to get where you are today. I know you said your background, you're a trained actor, but you do a whole bunch of things. I know you wear many hats. So if you could kind of take us on that journey, that would be great.
Sure. So I come from teachers. I'm very lucky to have born into a house of teachers. So they really encouraged me to major in curiosity as opposed to pigeonholing myself into a niche or a category, which felt a little before its time. I'm pretty old, so I'm thankful for my PBS upbringing, wherein exploration was kind of queen above all else. So as a result, I attended UC Berkeley undergrad and really didn't know what to major in because I just loved everything. And I ended up double majoring in theater and political science. And thereafter decided to move on to get my MFA in acting from the Brown Trinity Rep consortium. What I loved about the program was that they did foster this philosophy that it's all the same thing, which is that we're storytellers and that we're all working together and can and should switch hats as passions arise. So within the program, I took directing and playwriting for all 3 years, and acting was the main focus, so to speak, in the sense that the number of hours a day I was dedicating to the nuts and bolts of acting was primary. But I was lucky enough to go somewhere where it felt like a really good match for the way that I inherently kind of feel in the world as an artist, which is more of a whole artist. And none of this has value judgment. This is just whole in the sense of looking at art from many different points of view and feeling very comfortable and excited in each of those parts. Thereafter, I moved to New York City and was acting in theater. And word got out that I was good at dialects. So I just started doing it for actors that I love and friends, and just kind of jumping in and throwing my hat in when it was useful to my essential collaborators. I also started teaching at your lovely university at Barnard and Columbia's shared undergrad program. And that really launched me into a career of teaching that kind of took off of its own accord. Word sort of gets out once you start doing stuff. So I began teaching at NYU and master classes across the country. I transitioned into television and film sort of in the last year of teaching at Barnard. I don't know what year that was, forgive me, but that's when I began dialect coaching for television. And the same thing happened. Word got out, I started doing it more and more, and that's been a lot of my bread and butter as a practitioner in the city. But more than anything, I'm excited about the work that I like to make on my own with my friends, family. My husband and I work a lot together, writing our own materials, as well as producing them. I wrote a play, maybe 6 years ago or so, that eventually was produced at Xavier University and then downtown here in the city. And I'm currently writing something that I don't really know what it is yet, so it's far too chaotic to go there. But just to give you a sense of how fluid it all sort of is and has to be, I think within our business now more than ever, since I think we're all approaching new terrain. That I'm sort of doing all of those things all of the time. And the last directing I did was of the extraordinary Angelica in Men on Boats at Barnard, who continues to be one of my favorite actors.
I didn't realize, I didn't connect that you directed Men on Boats.
Yeah,
that was a fun one.
It's not all on you, Allie, because I co-directed it because I had to leave. I was very pregnant when I arrived and went into labor early, and so I was thankful that I wasn't doing that on my own. But so it is mine and not mine. It was an interesting experience to be there and then be totally gone and come in and watch the production. A singular experience, I would say.
Oh, that's great. I mean, that really is indicative of the collaborative nature that the arts should be.
Yes, absolutely. It was a joy. It's a joy to co-direct. I wish that we could do it all of the time. These hierarchies that we have to construct for things like payroll are just, I think, in many ways, a huge obstacle to creating, director, assistant director, stage manager, assistant stage manager. I both understand it and don't.
Great. Jess, were you trying to say something that I totally jumped over?
I was having a moment where I realized, I think you were working with Cody Hafter.
Yes, correct.
He was around when I was in undergrad, so we did a lot of shows together. So
he is a light. He is a light. He's
a beautiful person.
So smart. I was very lucky to work with him.
Oh, wonderful. And I know in your bio on your website, you talk about how you have equal love for all of your hats. And I think the way that you talk definitely embodies that. So that's really nice to hear.
I'm glad.
Yeah. Angelica, I know that you've been excited to ask Charise some questions. So I want to turn it over to you now to kick it off.
Yeah, of course. So you've acted, you've written, you've directed, which are all fields that require, at least to me, a lot of time and a lot of practice. So how do you manage to make time for it all while still staying focused?
It's a great question. I think I have to go another way in if I'm going to be really honest with you, which is to say that it isn't so much about finding time as self-directing to create opportunities. So I think that, the days of, I graduate and then I get an agent and then I get work we're already threatening to sort of be an era of the past. And now more than ever, I think that's becoming so. So it's not so much about, but I have these 17 things I want to do and how am I going to divide my calendar? It's more about finding a story that I'm passionate about or creating a story that I'm passionate about and then going towards that story. Mm-hmm. Of course, traditional acting audition structures are different than that, but I've sort of been in a position as an actor where I am seeking my own work and also sort of outreaching to people that I'm passionate about to get that work, as opposed to the traditional structure of having an agent that sends me out on auditions that I don't necessarily connect with, which is my husband's life. And that's why I can talk kind of freely about that, because I'm the one who puts him on tape every night after the children go to sleep for things that he either loves or hates. It's like there's no control. So I think that more than anything, since I haven't taken that traditional road from graduation, it's not been so much about dividing time as it has been about having ideas and then walking towards that idea in a singular way, and then another idea, walking towards that idea. Of course, things can get interrupted. One may go into labor, or one may, get an opportunity that is perhaps going to be more artistically rewarding than financially rewarding. And then we may pivot in that moment. And those are the moments that are tricky for me, is holding in both hands passion and money, capitalism, art, right? That's really where it gets hard. It doesn't so much get hard it's not so difficult for me to divide my time when it comes to the projects that I love, so much as it is to divide my projects for things that I need to pay money for. That makes sense.
You raised a really interesting point about the days of, graduating, getting an agent, getting, sent out for roles being kind of fading. So can you speak to how the industry is now, especially for people earlier in their careers, especially like in light of COVID and everything like that?
Yeah, I think that we're just seeing more and more that projects that are getting wonderful attention are projects that are self-generated, because they're coming from the heart and soul, and they're able to be created not necessarily with the whole bells and whistles hoopla that I necessarily work in TV and film that pays the bills, right? So it's not so much that the old way doesn't exist, it's that it's in conjunction with something that I find really exciting and that's getting more and more attention, which is a way in which an actor or a writer generates material and then brings it to some sort of professional table that then gets produced. That's obviously a very big thing to say. Well, how does it get produced is the question, right? And I would say that what's important to me to teach young actors more than anything, and that I have to completely remind myself all the time, because we can all get caught in our heads of, but it won't work because of this, and talk ourselves out of everything we want to do creatively. What I want to remind others, and in so doing remind myself, is that we have everything that we need to tell stories already, whether or not we realize it. I made my most recent film in quarantine on an iPhone, because that's what it was, right? We weren't allowed to reach out and be with others. So my husband and I did it together in Iowa. So I think that it's not that you don't want to get an agent and get auditions and work in that way. It's that if you're doing that and only that, it is likely that you're either going to burn out, or that you're not going to get the kind of feedback that you want and convince yourself that it isn't worth your time and then go to law school, which is fine. No judgment on that either. But do the other thing that's the safety thing in your mind, right? So I think it's really important that we all remember that we have the power to tell our stories now more than ever with our access to technology, and that we must do that in conjunction with whatever capitalist hierarchy is created as the story that the world wants to tell us of how to tell a story. We can do both at once.
Yeah. And I think that's really relevant, especially because today I feel like we're in the age of like the writer actor, like people like Michaela Coel or Phoebe Waller-Bridge. So how do you feel that each practice informs the other, like both writing and acting, or what it's like to perform your own work?
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so all I can really do is talk about my experiences, because I don't know how to answer that in a big way. It's such a good one. What I can tell you is that the play that I wrote, that was really the first thing that I ever wrote, like sat down and was like, I need to finish this, as opposed to being in school and writing smaller projects that I didn't necessarily feel like I needed to produce or see produced, because it was more like my lab and my self-generated artist way sort of work on my own. This was something I wrote that I was like, I need to share this with the world in a substantial way. In that instance, I didn't write anything for myself. And there genuinely wasn't anything for myself, I feel. And also, more to the point, I needed to remain outside of it. I felt as a young writer to remain objective about what the story was without me splitting in that way. Now, tons and tons of examples exist, of course, in film and television of the opposite, which is whoever, Charlize Theron, producing her own film that she's going to star in. Or a great example is Emma Thompson writes all of the time, right? And she puts herself in her films. And that is great. I just didn't feel like I was there yet. So I wrote something that I didn't organically feel I had a place in. And also I wanted to remain as objective as possible as an outside eye. So something that I made more recently, a couple of short films, I wrote for myself. And in those instances, I did feel very comfortable finding my way into, and I think it might have been because I had already written and seen something produced. And so I was able to get out of my own way of fearing that it was all some kind of big ego project or something like that. More than anything, I just want to make sure that the story is the strongest it can be, not that my acting is the strongest it can be in those instances of writing. And these last two times, I just felt more confidence with that, I think after a little bit of experience. But also, quarantine was what it was, and so it had to be me, right? So what's great about this time of life, I think, is that we can all get a little less precious about our policies around this stuff and throw it in the air and see what sticks and go from there. And in that sense, I had a great time with it because I wasn't quite so neurotic about whether or not I was being an actor about the story as opposed to being the writer about the story. I'm sure that's terribly unclear. I'm not sure how to answer that question.
That was a great answer. Yeah. So you talked about how COVID kind of changed your like mindset with regards to the different hats that you wear. How else do you feel being a multifaceted artist has, helped during COVID or been challenging during COVID?
Great question. I, like all of us, have had a really hard time this year. I just want to put that out there directly. As an artist and a collaborator and a person who thrives off of being in a room with human beings and the energy of storytelling with others, this has been really hard. So I want to put that out there first. I don't want to sugarcoat anything. I don't want to pretend like we're supposed to, I see this meme going around about, Shakespeare wrote during a pandemic. It's like, fine. But the pressure to write Cats the musical right now, we all just need to, I think, get over that, because the reality is that most of us create in conjunction with other humans. That's the way we create most deeply. So I want to say that it's been hard. The benefits of it have been me getting out of my own way in terms of excuses. Also with the thing that I'm writing right now, which feels like the making of a memoir, which is highly embarrassing, I feel like, to even say out loud, because who am I to write a memoir? But I think it's important that I say that, because I would bet a lot of money that a lot of people in this room right now are asking, who am I to write a play? Who am I to write a film? Who am I to write myself into my own play or film? Well, what I can tell you is that you're enough and that you better, right? Because if we don't try and stumble around with it, then the stories never get told. And I feel like poets are the most important people in history because we live to tell the story. And now more than ever, our world needs poets and storytellers. And so if, like me, you are embarrassed to say I am writing this thing out loud, then I encourage you to put it in the chat box so that we can all just give you a virtual high five, because this is the time to create things if they are in you. If they're not in you right now because you are deprived of all of the things that you need, like sunlight and water, aka friendship and exercise and wine with friends or what have you, I would encourage you to be easy on yourself the way I have had to be, because there are moments where the writing really comes in the last year and moments where they just don't, because I'm too spiritually or emotionally exhausted given what we've all been facing. So it's been both very hard and also wonderful, because I got out of my own way to start writing my own literal story, which is a memoir that I've been flirting with writing for some time, but really took a pandemic for me to sit down and write about, which is essentially about my relationship to my own body. And what better time to do it if it comes than when we're just with our own bodies, right?
Yeah. So for students who are also going through this pandemic, you mentioned telling the stories that are within you. How can students who, let's say they might come from an acting background, better transition into that?
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of stress and concern really does love company. And so creating a community that is online is very useful. Or if you have a pod, obviously, within your roommates or what have you, gathering to create space for focused time for it is really important. So if you can get an accountability buddy, which is just to say you don't have to share the work, but you're going to say, hey, Angelica, I would love for every Friday you to send me a text saying I did my homework, which was to sit down for whatever amount of time you want to call it during the week and just write. Yeah. Because I think starting is more challenging than anything, and not having that energy bouncing back in a room in a classroom environment keeps us from sitting down. So having that energetic presence, I think, just in the waves around us through text or email or Zoom or what have you, is going to be important, because everything else is going to get in the way, right? Like there's so much screen fatigue that I think there's a million excuses not to do that. So however you need to do it, to get an accountability buddy, a writer's group, some kind of community going that you self-generate, have faith that if you send that group email to a bunch of people who might be interested, you're going to get responses saying, yes, please, I would like to join your group, especially if there isn't pressure to share pages in the beginning, right? Mm-hmm. If it's simply like, we are going to make a fast and hard commitment that we are going to write for 5 hours a week. And at the end of the week, we're going to send a group chat and WhatsApp or what have you saying, I did my homework. That's a great starting place. And from there, people will start to bang on your door and say, hey, can I share my writing? I'm really scared, but can I share it? Right? So I think those baby steps are important in this time where we handhold ourselves and each other and give each other a lot of room and compassion and love to keep whatever needs to be private, creatively private, but also keep the door open for sharing when people are ready. Beyond that, I think the self-practice that I really enjoyed before I had children is morning pages. It's something I highly recommend if you feel like there might be a story inside of you. So when you wake up in the morning, before doing anything else, if you can, even before using the restroom, keep a journal by your bed and turn on your bedside light when your alarm goes off. And if you say you don't have time, set your alarm for 10 minutes earlier every day and free write. And by that, I mean, don't share it with anyone. It's not your creative writing. It's just a place to put all of the what ifs and I can't and but I'm too small, but this, but that every day so that it's sort of a cleansing of the palate of the mind. And in that sense, I have found in my own experience as a writer that it just makes room for new thoughts to generate that aren't quite so caught up in fear and worry, which is such a big part of our world now more than ever. So having a dumping ground in a journal is useful. Don't read them, wait a few months before you even read them. It's just a safe space. I think the other thing I might recommend is just keep yourself as inspired as possible with your artist dates. So if you can't, go to plays and movies and all of those things, find other ways to be in nature that feels generative. Read the story of Anton Chekhov's life to remind yourself just how important and crucial, Mary Oliver, any number of people, how crucial nature is to our lives as artists. If it means setting aside an afternoon to literally sit under a tree and do nothing, do it. So having that homework assignment in your calendar for yourself to take yourself on an artist date, I think is super useful. It can also be watching that old film that your dad talked about for a million years that you never got to, right? It could be anything as long as it feels like it's only for you. It's a secret that you're not telling anyone about. It's money in the emotional creative bank that you're putting in. So you're putting out in morning pages, you're taking in with that date. And ideally you have some kind of accountability in the universe, right? With other humans in some way electronically, or now that the vaccine is up and running, meeting under a tree 3 feet apart with your masks on, right? So I don't know, that's kind of, I think, where I might begin.
Yeah.
We actually had, sorry to interrupt, Angelica, we actually had one of our students who's watching did drop in what they're working on right now. So perhaps some of these tips that you've given, Helen will be able to take away from here.
Get it, Helen. That's awesome.
Angelica, perhaps this is a connection you need to make here, and you guys can form a collaborative posse. I'm not sure.
Accountability group, yeah. Great.
Collaborative posse, accountability group, whatever.
So in addition to taking these artist days, what else can students do to, I guess, take advantage of the opportunities they have as students to learn different skills, to put these things into practice, or also to have the confidence to put them into practice? Because sometimes the opportunities are there, but
absolutely. Whatever class you're afraid of taking, you need to take. So if it's playwriting, if it's creative writing, if it's acting, if it's stage management, whatever the yang to your yin is that feels like I am not this person, I could never do this, you got to do it. Mine was costume design. I took it in college. I was terrible. No one has ever been worse at designing a costume than me. And I took it and it was super important. After school, getting ready to prep for auditions for graduate school, I took a ballet class. I showed up in a literal tutu with pink tights, and everyone there was in, ripped t-shirts and amazing, stretchy pants. And I looked like a complete idiot. And it was really important, doing the thing that's most embarrassing for you. That's the thing to do in school, because if you can't allow yourself to fall on your face in school, how can you do it in front of other people in the world? And I'll tell you something, 99% of the artist's job is to get more comfortable with being embarrassed. Exposing our vulnerability is our literal job. So whatever you can do in school to create a construct around that, that's a safe space with a teacher that, of course, a teacher that comes recommended that you trust and all of those things, go for it. Take that class. Also, Angelica, we live in New York City, so After things pick up, go to the theater.
Yes.
Go. See everything that you can. See things for free. See things that, save your money for that one thing that you feel like you couldn't afford. This is the most inspiring place I've ever lived.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important, I feel like, to take advantage of it when we can and when it's safe.
Yeah. Also, off that note, how do you feel that New York has like impacted like all of your different practices like in the theater?
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, there's like Broadway and like commercial stuff, and then on the other hand, you can find like the rarest of, productions.
Yeah, I think New York has brought out my weird, which is really crucial. Like, I think that it has allowed me to sort of free up the traditional Aristotelian storytelling structure that we learn as children that's really important and that we have to understand with beginning and middle of end. That's just a fundamental building block of what it is to be a human being and tell a story. It's allowed me to kind of throw all that up in the air and find different ways into storytelling. Similar to the way you would look at color in a painting, that you might stand back and start by looking at an entire scene and painting an entire scene. And then eventually, after you get surrounded by people who are braver and you're seeing work that's braver, you become obsessed with that one color of blue inside of that speck of the eyeball. And it's the same thing for me when it comes to creating work within New York City. I think that it's exposed me to such incredible experimental facets of storytelling, ways in that I never imagined, be it the left foot or the actual mind or the collaborator, Angelica, working in a moment, right? Or my child or what have you. I think it's allowed me to more authentically, without pushing, find ways into stories that I didn't necessarily ever dream was possible. And that's just because I'm surrounded by brilliant geniuses and I get to see their work and I get to read about their work and I get to hear about their work. So I think that's probably the biggest influence the city has had on me. It's also been really important for me as a kid who kind of grew up by the ocean to seek quiet and solitude in a town that's pretty loud. Mm-hmm. And so the other side of that coin is that sometimes it can get overwhelming, and I do seek retreats wherein I can get a little bit more quiet and make something without the constant bombardment of stimulus, which for me can sometimes interfere with my way in, right? Mm-hmm. If I want to focus on the left foot as a way in, as a silly example, like if I'm surrounded by a lot of noise all the time, I can easily get distracted and just procrastinate and not write the story. So I sometimes need to take breaks from New York in order to reappreciate it. So if you're one of those people, I just want to tell you, you're not alone.
Speaking of like different ways in, do you think that for students who are recently graduated or actors who are younger, doing like having different hats, do you think that they should start with like a niche as a way in, or they should just start, putting themselves out there with everything?
I'm the last person who's going to should all over you, because I think that it's really, who's to say? I mean, Meryl Streep, I think, was the one who said, how the hell do you teach acting? It's, like, how do you teach that? It's so individualized. And yet I also understand your question, Angelica. And what I would say is that I think of it kind of like I always think of an image of an onion. Like at the core of my onion is acting, and I know that. When I act, I am the least self-conscious, the most free, the most generative, and I feel like it just comes easiest for me. So that for me just felt like an authentic starting place. Like I knew when I read text that it would come through my body as an actor in a way that felt very correct and in line with my mind, body, and spirit. Just I'm going to go there because that's just the way that I think about my work. Don't let it scare you. You can call it whatever you want, right? And so if that is true for you for writing or for tech or for design, do that hard and do that fast and do that to your utmost joy and potential, and surround yourself with mentors who do it too and learn from them. And I think what I would say is then if something else comes up, which I feel like were we not in a capitalist society, it just would. Stay open to that and don't tell yourself that it's too late or, oh, that's not on my resume, so I can't light that set or what have you. You will figure it out. You guys are the smartest people I've ever taught. And I don't mean intellectually, which you happen to also be, but this university, I feel like, is really good at generating new ideas. And so trust yourself that if you have a new idea, it's because you have it, and own it and allow yourself the mentorship and also the surroundings to make that part of yourself happen also. So said a different way, go as a fish, like go with the water that creatively is happening for you, and don't overthink it. Do it. It brings you joy. It brings you joy. And then be ready to pivot if it comes up and be excited about it, as opposed to, oh, but I can't because, etc. You absolutely can. You should. You must. Some of our favorite artists, I know, all of us, do more than one thing.
Yeah. Do you find that drifting from like that core of acting is something that worries you a lot, or is it something you're completely comfortable with?
Oh, no, I'm totally worried all the time, Angelica. It's a part of my heritage. So I come from a long line of worriers. I married a worrier. It's just a house of worry. What I would say is that what I worry is that, well, first of all, I care a lot. And so anytime I get a job, even if I've done it forever, like acting, I'm going to have a moment of worry for sure. I don't want to pretend like I don't, because I do with acting. It always comes up. But as far as worrying that like I'm not acting enough, that's also, I think, a facet of my psyche. With acting, you have to have other people invite you to the table if you haven't written it. And so that part of it is very worrisome to me and frustrating to me, given that, so many casting directors kind of and producers and stuff lack some imagination. And so they have an idea of what they want, and then they sort of get what they want. And we're in a hierarchical society where work begets work. And so as soon as you have a name for yourself, naturally you're going to get more work. And that is all fine and good and great, except that it doesn't leave a lot of room for creative thinking about character and humanity, right? We're getting into this phraseology of type. Now, what I'm so stoked about is that finally the world is recognizing how incredibly problematic that is for so many groups of people. And so it is changing. But I've detoured into another path. I just wanted to put that out there because I think it's important, going back to your original question of how things changed pre and post COVID. We can also ask ourselves, how have things changed pre and post socio-political 2020, 2021, right? So my worry is also about that oftentimes, that like, I am only going to be seen as this person who does this kind of acting because that's the kind of acting I've been seen doing in TV and film and theater. And it's frustrating to me. So I think it's an inevitable byproduct of being an actor that we all live with. And we just, I think over time, learn to work through more quickly without as many apologies. Just to say, this sucks, I hate it. I'm saying it to the person I love who's also an actor. And now I can put that away and do my work in this moment. Right. So yes, worry is a part of my life in many ways. I don't worry as much as I used to each time I reapproach something like coaching, because I do that all of the time. But the things that I have done, I think less of the time, like directing and writing, like when we actually take number of projects I've acted, coached, and then directing and writing, certainly when I approach directing or writing, I worry and over prepare more than I would as an actor coach.
One of the things you mentioned is, the capitalist society that we live in, the fact that, there are bills to be paid and rent and everything. So to someone who, let's say, they're working a 9 to 5, but they still want to be creative and like do like all these different things, how do they keep that spirit alive and not get defeated by the world around them?
Guys, thank goodness for Angelica. She asks all of the right questions. That's exactly right, Angelica, because the easiest thing to do is to get tired and burn out in a world that, in a city especially, that requires a lot of financial security. And that's why we're seeing more and more that New York isn't creating space for artists. It's exhaustingly tragic and terrible because our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation came to the city with other trials. One of the blessings of arriving at the city was that there was space for people of different economic statuses to create art. That is proving more and more false as rents get higher and higher. So it's now more than ever really important that we artists have our own practice that is outside of the 9-to-5 survival gig to keep our light on, right? The eternal light, I'll call it, as a woman who was raised Jewish with the bima. Like, we need to have our eternal artist light kept aflame, and that takes diligence and practice. The worst time in an artist's life is graduating from a master's program and then going into the city, because you've gone from working 5,000 hours a day on your creativity to then trying to figure out how to survive without any of those resources around you. And nobody really talks about how to do that after school. Like, it's not a part of our education. It wasn't a part of my undergraduate education either. And I imagine it's because it's so personal that it might be scary for different academic programs to broach, and I understand that. I also think it's really important that we turn that rock over and look at all those bugs and say, yes, there are bugs here, and we need to figure out how to work with them, right? So we all have to figure out how to keep our light on, and it is an instance of trial and error for everybody. So don't be frustrated if you're trying something and you're finding that your light is getting dimmer as a result of it. For example, if you graduate and you decide, I need to stay in an acting class, and you take an acting class and you don't connect with the teacher, or you don't feel emotionally safe, or you aren't doing the kind of work that challenges you, etc., whatever the reasons are, get out of the acting class. Barnard and Columbia is full of people who I flatter myself to say are similar to me, in that you guys aren't quitters. You don't like to quit things. As an artist, you got to be willing to quit. You got to be willing to quit a job, quit an acting class, quit whatever you need in order to make space for what is correct for your particular artistry. And you got to be willing to quit the survival job that's sucking you dry. So even though your best buddy is waiting tables, you might find that that is actually not okay for who you are as an artist, and it's draining your well, right? So play around with survival jobs to figure out which one is right for you, which one can give you the most energy. It's not going to be perfect, but perhaps you need to be working with children or the elderly or what have you instead of in the restaurant business. I don't know what that is, but you want to play around with that. And you also want to play around with whatever the outside thing is. So I've talked about accountability buddies. I've talked about acting classes. I've talked about artist dates. But it may not be something that is within the box that you completely understand. And this is where I'm going back into the thing of don't be afraid to stretch and to try something that scares you. Now more than ever, it's important. If you feel like your light's going out, you might not need to stare at more Shakespeare. That might be just sucking you dry at this point. You might need to take a pottery class, right? You might need to challenge yourself to, paint or what have you, sing, do the thing that you feel like you can't do, because it's going to keep you brave. And again, vulnerability is our job. So keeping the vulnerability intact is part of keeping that eternal light lit. And it just takes a little bit of fumbling around to figure out what it is. And it changes, right? Like for me, something that worked before isn't going to work before. If I pop myself into a downward facing dog after 20 years of doing yoga, if it's not doing the thing for me that I need to do, then I need to change, right? I need to go join a baseball team or at least find a different yoga class. So yeah, I think it takes a lot of self-discipline.
Yeah.
So we actually have a question from one of our live viewers right now. The question is,
Alana!
Awesome. What recommendations would you have for people wanting to practice their theatrical artistry during this time, given the current pandemic climate?
Hello, Alana, costume designer for Men on Boats, genius, wonderful human being. Hello, I miss you. Okay, what recommendations would you have for people wanting to practice their theatrical artistry during this time, given the current pandemic climate? Okay, so Alana, I'm not going to speak to your niche because I don't see you asking that question. I'm going to just speak to the general question of artistry instead. What was that sound? Does that mean thumbs up or something like that? Okay, cool. So what I would say is that it is the time to be doing things like research, whatever that means for you. So for an actor, again, dad's old films, perhaps watching films of yourself and your family when you were a child, anything that's going to ignite that flame in you of playfulness as an actor that you can take in, the screen can be a big blessing, because film and television has gotten amazing. It wasn't when I was a kid, but it is really good now. Film was good, TV wasn't. So watch things that are very inspiring to you. And again, they can be family films or footage of things that are being made by people that you know and love. I think that we snark on social media a lot, and I understand why, but some people have live TV and things that people are finding very inspiring during this time. So seek out those weird corners of the world as an actor that might inspire you in that way. And I would imagine, and I can't speak to what you do, Alana, because you do it so brilliantly, but I would imagine the answer would be similar from someone like Sandra Goldmark. I always do that. Goldfrank. Head of design at Barnard. I would imagine, Mark, thank you. I would imagine Sandra might say something similar, which is take in anything that you can to inspire you, be it a period of time in costumes or a specific genre or especially something that you've never explored before. Get weird, get existential. Go into the pocket in the corner that you won't have time for when things open up and you get all of those brilliant theater jobs that you're going to get, Alana. Allow yourself to become obsessed with something or someone in particular, and what kind of design surrounds that human being. So I would say for all of us, we just need to get really obsessed with research and taking in. And I'm sure that smart people have stuff to say about dancing in that regard and singing in that regard, and I won't pretend to know the answer, but I think you understand my point.
Going off that, like speaking of like obsessions, like what do you happen to be obsessed with at this point, like just for fun?
Well, that's a great question. I have a 3-year-old and a 15-month-old, so it's hard to have obsessions because I'm in boot camp. I have to go to bed at 9 p.m. because I wake up at 5:45 a.m. So I'm living a very particular kind of life right now, wherein the information that I'm taking in is 9 minutes remaining. Wow. Is largely in relation to parenting and artistry as a combination. So I'm not doing the kind of watching of things that I normally love to do. I'm also coaching a great deal right now. So most of my time is spent honestly resting. That's like really what I'm doing. When I have time off, I'm either doing yoga, I'm on a jog, or I'm sleeping. I'm trying to think of what I watched recently that I really loved. What is that show about soccer that everybody's talking? Ted Lasso, I found really positive and inspiring. That really helped me because dark times, right? I needed that. I needed like a real heavy dose of positivity and dorkiness and earnestness and unapologetic, like doing good in the world storytelling. And that's really what I required as a mother of 2 tiny babies who's very tired. So that's just specific to me, right? So I don't think it's so useful, but Ted Lasso is a good show. I will put it out there.
Yeah, I think speaking about having children is very useful. Like during Men on Boats, you were very pregnant and left due to that. So how would, like as a mom, how would you say, how do you find family planning, like in light of being an artist? Like, how do you maintain that balance?
Yeah. Unfortunately, like everything else in this country, we've got it backwards. Yeah. So our world isn't set up to help care for our children. I mean, we look at our priorities thus far of keeping bars open before schools for children with COVID. And that is really all we need to say to understand where our priority as a country lies. So we're not getting much help from the top down here. For me, it's really about community. And surrounding myself with other artists who are parents and throwing each other all of the help and bones that we can in the sort of old school kibbutz way, where we look after each other's children. We share Google documents for babysitters now who are vaxxed. We like step in if there's a last minute rehearsal or something that needs to happen, and we help each other's families and children. Women helping women is really what it is, you guys. Like, shout out to all of our wonderful male identifying folks out there. But I will say that female identifying people have been the reason why I'm able to be an artist and a mother. I hope that our wonderful country does something to change that at some point. But for now, it's really about surrounding yourself with people who have the same goals so that you can continue to make space for your work, because more than ever, once you have children, you need to be really diligent about your practice. And that's why I'm saying I'm in boot camp right now, because I have to rest when I rest so that I have what I need to do my work during the hours of childcare that I do have to do my work and only my work. But having said that, my children are the most inspiring part of my work. They are, the most motivating factor of the things that I make now. So if you are interested in being a parent, I want you to not be afraid of it, and to tell you that they give back in ways that one could never imagine, because they are the most creative, vulnerable, open-hearted creatures on the planet. And so if anything, they're a reminder of what it is to stay playful, to not get precious about things, and to just play as much as possible. But it does require a lot of planning and diligence, and also a lot of communicating around pregnancy and childbirth and things in order to put yourself in a position where you can continue to work. And I was very fortunate to be at Barnard during that time with wonderful Bill Worthen, who, when he found out my due date was opening night, said, let's make it work. Let's hire you a co-director, found Cody. And those are the kinds of places that you want to continue working with and for. There are institutions and theaters that are creating more and more space for parents, and Equity is working really, really hard in the theater to make that happen, because women have hid pregnancies for years so that they wouldn't have to give up their jobs. We have a long way to go, but we're on our way. So if that's something that you want to put your energy towards, any of you out there, politically get involved with Equity, because we can use all the advocates we can get as mothers who are artists.
Wow. I did not know that about Equity.
We have a question from one of our viewers about rest and the guilt that taking rest might bring about.
Oh gosh, yeah. What was the question exactly? May I ask? Or oh, I see. Yes, very direct, Allie. Exactly as it says. Does it make you feel guilty about resting? Yes, but I was born feeling guilty. It's just part of my culture. I like worry. So yes, when I am resting, I do feel like I should be working. When I'm mothering, I feel like I should be working. When I'm working, I feel like I should be mothering. When I'm not, I feel like I should be resting. It's like a whole thing, So forgive yourself for splitting your mind. I don't know a human who doesn't feel that way, including like huge movie stars that I coach and work for who have zillions of dollars, and, our parents who are also artists, they feel it too. Like everybody feels that. It knows no class or bounds, I think. So I think that we just get more used to the feeling, and we get more used to working through it with more efficiency of, oh, right, there's the guilt thing. Okay, great. I'm going to just recognize that, name it, and move on to my moment of parenting that I'm in now, or resting I'm in right now, or working that I'm in right now. So it doesn't go away so much as we're able to see it more quickly. Rest is hard for me because I have a lot of energy. So I've been an insomniac for a long time because I have like all this energy and ideas and things that I want to do. So I've also had to create sort of a sacred thing around sleep so that I am rested enough to do my job. And if you're one of those artists, I know a lot of them actually who have trouble turning off their minds because they have a lot of ideas. Know that you're not alone, that great work can get created at night. Get up, write it down, do the thing, and then go back to bed. Lying there and thinking about the idea is never going to help you, which is why morning pages can be very useful for rest also, because when you're dumping in that way, when you're on your artist state, when you're having creative collaborators to check in with you with integrity, just to bring this full circle for a moment, it does become easier to rest without guilt. So it's a sort of holistic approach to the whole enchilada, I would say.
Jess, do you have any questions? I know we've been having a nonstop conversation out here, but I'm wondering if there's anything that you wanted to jump in with.
I feel like, Angelica, you had a lot of the questions that I was the most curious about. Charise, I guess one other thing that I was interested in is you mentioned getting involved with Equity in terms of policy building. And I think across the board, parental care in the US has some issues. And so that's something I think is very interesting. I wonder if you find ways that in situations like that, or in other situations just throughout your time in the field, that you've found your political science degree helpful as well. I love it when those sorts of things sort of smush together, have our two interests come together in the arts.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you that I have been the head of X, Y, and Z campaigns. I've not. What I have found is that we all kind of have to figure out what our gift is from a tzedakah philanthropic point of view and go towards that. And what I found is has been my place in the world is mentorship. So more than leading campaigns for women who are new mothers, which I haven't had a moment anyway because Mariah's 3 and Eli's 15 months, but I've just found that what naturally comes towards me and I go towards is mentorship of young people, especially young female identifying people who are wanting to pursue a life in the arts. So a lot of my energy is placed there. The poli-sci part of things is really, for me, more about just being extremely passionate and curious about the way the world works. And I always said if I could go back to Berkeley and do it again, I'd probably create my own major and add religion to that whole trifecta, like art, politics, and religion. Like what winds our clocks, what makes us go, what makes us sort of generate new ideas, because they're not that different. I mean, the joke within the family who never understood, many members of my family, not my nuclear, thank goodness, but of the poli-sci theater majors, oh, you'll make a great politician because you're probably very good at lying, which is, you know, incredibly inaccurate and depleting and misunderstood. What I would say instead is that it taught me, poli-sci with theater taught me how to just, again, major in curiosity and remain very interested in the world. So as a Spanish speaker, like I was just always traveling. I was always wanting to learn more about the world that we're occupying, as opposed to doing that summer intensive theater camp workshop thing in the Berkshires or whatever. I would drop it all and go and travel and do something entirely different. And I would just encourage anyone who's interested in that to do that. I think that the seduction of, but I have to get 17,000 apprenticeships from Williamstown is very strong. That pressure is very strong. It is only one way, and it is certainly not my way. While I appreciate all of the situations I found myself in where I have been, you know, in that hierarchy of apprentice or what have you, the most useful part of my past has been that poli-sci curious part that wants to read the New York Times cover to cover, go to every corner of the world, and wishes that I spoke more than just English and Spanish.
So we are actually right at the end of time. Angelica, did you have any last burning questions that you wanted to ask?
No, just thank you so much for sharing your wisdom.
Thanks for having me. It's such a joy to especially be with you, Angelica. Thank you for inviting me. And Ali and Jess, thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you. And, you know, maybe we could close out with, you know, just a little nugget of advice you'd like to share with our viewers and our students. I know that's hard because there's so much to say, but if you had one, you know, primary takeaway, what would you want to give the students?
Yeah, that's so, it's very big of you to think that I might have something to offer. I think that we're all doing the best that we can, but I guess the thing that I need to hear the most that you may want to or need to hear is that you are enough, you are enough, you are enough. So whatever is happening and whatever you're working or not working on yet, you are enough for that thing. Trust.
Wonderful. Well, again, this is Charise Green joining us this evening, and we've dropped her website in the comments if you want to check that out and learn more. Next week, we will be joined by a lighting designer who does both television and theater named Eric Haugen. So come on back next week at 6 o'clock, same time, same place, and we will see you then. Thank you so much, Charise. Thank you for everyone joining us.